Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has so far rejected pressure to prescribe Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard a terrorist organisation following the country's missile and drone barrage aimed at Israel. Iran and its proxies in Iraq, Syria and Yemen fired a wave of projectiles on Saturday, with most being downed by Israel and its allies. The Israeli government wants sanctions to be imposed on Iran's missile project following the unprecedented assault. Israel's war cabinet's been meeting for the third time in as many days, with the government reportedly split between hitting Iran hard and maintaining allies' support. Calls for restraint have come from all areas of the globe, but Israel's vowed to respond to the attack. Joining me in the studio now, security expert Will Geddes. Hello, Will. And down the line, we're joined by retired General Tim Cross, who commanded one of the 3 divisions of the UK Field Army. General Cross, thank you so much for joining us. Why don't I start with you on this one? I mean, there's a great deal, of course, of reaction around the world to this, and Israel being advised and told in pretty categorical and unequivocal terms, you know, keep your powder dry, don't overreact, and as David Cameron, our Foreign Secretary, said, respond with the head and not the heart. But then there's also a welter of opinion which says, you know, no other country in the world would be told, so, you know, you've had 300 missiles raining down on you. Well, sit back, relax, don't overreact. That's an unreal expectation, not one that kind of holds water anywhere in the world. So I'm wondering what you think, with your wealth of military expertise, on this one.
Well, I have to say, I come down, in the context of what you've just said, I come down on the side of caution and what David Cameron and lots of others are saying. I mean, we do need to see broader context of this, which is, you know, a pretty big context. I mean, I was born in 51. I remember the 56, 67, 73, you know, et cetera, wars that have gone on. So we've had almost 100 years of this going on in the Middle East between Israel and the Arab nations. And at the end of the day, the only way this is going to stop is for people to, wise judgment of people, to stop reacting and simply retaliating every time something happens. Now, of course, I've got huge sympathy with Israel. I mean, I have to say, I sit on the, you know, their side of the fence on this. But I do think that simply reacting now in a way is not going to help. They need to pause. And I think when they said the other day, first of all, that they would react, you know, in a time and place of their own choosing, I thought that was a sort of step back and maybe thinking about, you know, a more judgment, a considered judgment of what to do. I hope that they don't now try and do something which hits Iran, because all that's going to end up with is further spread of the conflict. And the real danger, well, one of the things that Iran did not do was to order Hezbollah, for example, to use an awful lot of missiles, tens of thousands of missiles that Hezbollah have got in Syria. So although, of course, it was a dangerous strike and all of that, but the bottom line is, in some ways, I think it was more restricted than some people feared. And I think collectively we need statesmen around the world to stop talking up war and try and talk down what's going on here and bring some considered judgment to the whole piece.
Which are the statesmen around the world? Which countries do you think are talking up war rather than trying to allay the intention to retaliate? Who are the countries you think are responsible for kind of ramping it up?
Well, clearly Israel and Iran are part of that. I have to say, you know, forgive me in one sense, but I have to say that the media too, we have a lot of commentators and writing, you know, I've been reading a lot about this, as you have. A lot of people saying that they have got to retaliate. They've got to, you know, they can't allow Iran to get away with this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to sound despairing, but I don't see an awful lot of statesmen and women around the world with the sort of wisdom we need here. To be fair, Biden and indeed our own Prime Minister have been saying publicly a number of things. But what we need is influence behind. We need diplomacy. We need to get back to quiet diplomacy with people speaking behind the media headlines and appearing every 5 minutes, you know, on the media in the round, and putting influence to bear on people like Netanyahu. Within the Arab world, actually, I think there are some serious players who are trying to do that. We're seeing it in Qatar. We're seeing other Arab nations involved in this. And it was interesting that in the context of what's happening, there were Arab nations who were involved, if you like, in dealing with this Iranian threat. Jordan closing its airspace, for example. That's not the same when it comes to Gaza. So I think there are Arab nations that we should be working with and getting them to try and influence what's going on, and we need to quietly behind the scenes continue to put pressure on Netanyahu.
Let me
I'm
bring
not awfully confident that there's a lot of good stuff going on, is the truth, but I hope I'm wrong.
Will get us into the picture. Do you think it's realistic to expect Netanyahu to bow to pressure, because that so far hasn't been his character trait really, or his policy?
Yeah, no, firstly, I have to agree with everything Tim said.
Yeah.
I can't disagree with any of that. I think the first thing is Netanyahu, who's not best liked by Israelis themselves.
No.
The vast majority don't like him. This has given him more wind to his sails, if you like, in terms of his actions, particularly against Hamas and certainly against Iran. In terms of the pressure on him, whether he wants to or not, I think he's going to be swayed by certainly the international community and international statesmen, and especially Joe Biden. Joe Biden is an election year. If he was to support Netanyahu in a retaliation against Iran, I think he would put himself at great jeopardy of his potential candidacy for president for another term. I think the other issue is David Cameron's actually talking an awful lot of sense. And again, as Tim was saying, he's looking for calm. He's looking for cool heads to look at a very hot situation. Netanyahu also doesn't have the support really of much of the international community. There are a number of factors at play here which will be levelled down and cascaded to many of the military generals and many of the military personnel. That, to be absolutely honest, the attack last Sunday by Iran was not only thwarted by certainly the Israelis' countermeasures, but certainly, and this obviously impacted and was probably a very good reason why Jordan certainly restricted airspace and kept all their planes grounded, is that there are 4 GPS systems fundamentally running across the world. One controlled by Russia, one by China, India, and the United States. And I believe, and certainly from some of my sources, that the GPS by the US was taken down. So the accuracy of those attacks was going to be thwarted. So we know that America plays a very, very strong part. Over and beyond that, there's the economic implications. Oil prices are already exponentially higher since the conflict started. There is also the issue of this being a 7-month conflict, which I believe is the longest Israel has actually ever been engaged in. And there are Palestinians and Gazan citizens who are remaining in the city. And I think even if Egypt opened up its borders, which I think would be highly unlikely, they wouldn't move. They would stay where they are. So there is more about retrieving this situation, bringing it back to the table to discuss than anything else. And that is the only way this is going to get resolved, in my opinion.
Gentlemen, thank you both very much indeed.